Welcome to
Bean Stuff.
Today we are digging a little bit more into coffee botany. Last week we kind of did more of a, I guess you could say kind of an intro to it. We went a little deeper, but today we're going to kind of, it's going to be a continuation of that, and we're going to keep going and digging into it.
It makes me realize, as we keep digging into it, you dig into anything and you realize this goes down deep, and we could probably spend the next year on coffee botany, but I think we'd lose all our listeners.
Well, it is crazy. Like, I mean, I think you were, and maybe I may be jumping way ahead of everything, but I think that we had talked about it earlier. It could be such a boring topic. Like, it could be just mind-numbing.
You're right. It's like at school when you're listening to math or history or whatever it may be, you think, what on earth relevance does this have to me? And you sort of turn off. Right. Until you sort of get further down life a little bit and you realize, ooh, I wish I'd listened to history class, because who is Bonaparte? Who is, George Washington? What did they do? Because where I live right now, it makes sense. I need to know. It'd be good to know about him.
When's the last time you used Bonaparte?
Bonaparte. He's a Frenchman.
Right. I know who he is. Well, but when's the last time you used him?
It was just an illustration.
Okay.
Because you're right. Some parts I didn't need to know.
Right. Like Bonaparte.
Whereas others I did need to know. And I'm thinking of botany. When I did zoology at university, I thought, what on earth am I doing this just to be here? I don't really know. But now I look back and think, wow, it had some parts about learning about scientific technique, how to study something, right? And botany was included in this topic, and I used to think, whoa, but now I realize it makes sense. It helps me understand what I'm even drinking in the cup now.
And I think it makes so much sense to, as you get more into coffee, as you become more interested in the process or the parts that make up coffee, how does it, how does that coffee get into your cup? What things are changing the coffee? What things are affecting that in the growing process? What types of trees are there? I mean, there's so much to it. I think of it like, I think we had talked about like music previously. If you start playing an instrument, at first it's like, I'll just get any instrument. And then eventually it becomes, okay, now I want to get a better instrument. Okay, now I want to get something that does this, and I want strings that are made this way. And like you start really getting into the details, the finer.
And injuries it's a good illustration. I think you not only just whatever instrument, if you choose like you and I did, a bass guitar, you start, or when you hear music now, you hear a group playing away there, just boogieing away there, and you hear, what do you and I hear? We hear the bass. Oh, look, you hear that little riff they did there? That's different. Whereas before we didn't have a clue. Right. We're just getting more interested in it and realizing you can go as deep as you want.
Absolutely. So
that was a long introduction, wasn't it?
That was more than usual, but it was good. It was good. So as we get into it, last week we finished up talking about the tree. We talked about how each tree only has 4,000 beans-ish on it, and you get about a pound of coffee from it. So there is really, it takes a lot of trees to make a lot of coffee, especially when you think of how many bags you see in the store. They're all using the same coffee. How is that real?
Yeah, I mean, they're using a lot of trees of coffee. I mean,
must be huge farms.
They're huge, and there are huge farms. You go to Brazil, you'll find huge farm, and on the other side of that, you go to Ethiopia, you find this little farm. It's not, you wouldn't call it a farm. It's like a quarter of a paddock. It's just a little plot. And how do they survive? They do it by co-op, by mixing up with other farmers and joining up, because coffee, that cup of coffee we have in the morning or in the evening, whenever we have it, it takes a lot of coffee trees to get that packet, a whole tree to get just the 1 pound.
Well, and there's a whole other part to coffee there, economy of how do you scale things, how do you, all that.
That's an important topic, but yeah.
But let's start by talking about, kind of the nursery stage of coffee. What does it take to grow coffee? And we may have kind of touched on some of these things briefly in the last episode, but we want to start with soil. How important is soil? I mean, obviously it's what it grows in, so it's got to be somewhat important.
You can't just grow it in space, but it needs soil, you're right. But that's where that you start digging down. I don't mean to use the word digging. You're digging down into it, and you start realizing we could spend time just on the soil, because I don't know a lot about soil other than it's dirt and that it's got different chemicals, your phosphorus content there, ammonia. There's a whole lot of things, chemicals just in that soil. And those amounts and proportions of those different chemicals in there make a difference to growing anything, let alone a coffee tree that has these very particular requirements. If you give it too much potassium, it's going to go, no thanks. Not enough potassium, no thanks. Just the right amount, I'm going to grow.
Well, and I think, it's interesting. We were talking about the complexity of just coffee, but then there's so many subsets of, what's the complexity of soil? What's the complexity of the chemicals that make up that? How does that all work?
We have to make another podcast, not dirt on stuff. Coffee, but on dirt stuff. Yeah. I like that.
But it does take good soil, and that's kind of a no duh.
But it does. You're right. It's not no duh in a sense because it needs good soil.
Right.
And how do you get good soil? You fertilize, whether it's natural or not.
Yeah.
Is how deep does the soil level go? Is it thick? Is it dry? Yeah. There's a whole lot of things go there. Just the soil, the tree's going to go, I can grow here or I can't grow here.
And even just the agricultural knowledge it takes to understand how to cultivate good soil.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were talking with Michael Ryan a couple weeks ago now, and he was talking about working in China and educating people on best practices for cultivating good farms for coffee and how to sustain soil year over year and some stuff like that. And it was just like, I would be a horrible coffee farmer. My soil would be terrible.
You and I were talking before we started we're talking about the difference between Arabica and Robusta. We may get there today, who knows. But mono, what did I call that? Monoculture, production. What it meant, mono meaning.
I'll look it up while you keep talking.
It means one, in fact, they grow the tree that year and then they grow it again next year and they grow it in the same place next year and it actually starts using up all the nutrients and there are no more nutrients.
Monocropping.
Good, thank you, Reed. Oh, mate. Our fact checker there. But, and if you grow it too long in one place.
Right.
Suddenly you've taken all the nutrients and it doesn't grow the same yield as it did last year.
Well, wasn't there, I think there was I don't know the name, George Washington, not George Washington the president, but a different George Washington that found out that growing peanuts in the off season helped revitalize soil.
Makes sense.
I don't know how that relates to coffee, but that kind of idea that there is, if you keep sucking nutrients out of the ground with a plant, then you need something to reintroduce that.
That's right. The whole horticultural, I'm sure they discover practices of, and for coffee it is, I know as well, what do you grow in the off season? Let's grow something else to change the nutrients, change the soil up again.
Right.
But you've got timings to go there and production and where the people are going to come. They come to pick the coffee trees, then they go somewhere else, another country, where they pick the pineapples or whatever crop it's going to be.
Well, and I think even last week we talked about temperature of the soil.
Whoa.
Is important.
Oh, yeah.
So, there's just so much cruciality, if that's a word.
That's a good word. If it's not, it should be.
I'm going to enter it into Google.
Oh, mate.
But
I was here when you did that.
But there's so much that's crucial just in even the soil.
Yeah.
Without even getting to the environment outside of the soil.
I know.
Above ground.
Whoa, altitude. We got all these things to come. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Let's slow it down for a second and go back to the flower.
Okay.
So the flower, when does that appear on coffee? How many years does it take for the flower to come out?
I haven't waited to see it happen, but I've been told it takes 3 to 4 years for a coffee plant. Once it's the seedling, you grow it, the soldiers, and then it takes 3.
Now, whoa, you said something there. You said soldiers.
So, yeah.
Now, if you weren't here on the last podcast,
okay, sorry.
A soldier, if you were to plant I'll throw a photo on the screen if you're watching.
Wow.
I'll put a link to it if you're not watching. But a soldier is essentially, if you were to plant the bean.
Okay, you got the coffee cherry. You take all that apart.
All right, coffee cherries,
layers
the coffee
all
fruit.
come off, and you've got down You got down to the coffee seed now. That's
a green version of what the brown piece you see ground up for your coffee.
That's right. It's smaller, or it's 2 halves normally.
Right.
And you take that and you plant that into soil. The stuff we're talking about.
So you have the coffee bean, and then a shoot comes out the bottom.
Yep, the roots come out down the bottom. Not the shoots really, but the roots.
Well, it shoots out. It shoots out.
I hear what you're saying.
It's not a shoot,
and that pushes up what was the coffee seed.
So it looks like a bean on a stem.
Yep, it does.
And that's a soldier.
And that's a soldier because you get a whole lot of them all in a row, and I guess they call them soldiers in a row.
But so that's what you mean. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop.
No, it's a good point.
Describing soldiers.
You see that? It's funny. That picture you may show it shows you that coffee seed coming up, and that becomes the leaves of the first two leaves of the coffee tree, and you've started the whole nursery process,
right?
And so that's what soldiers are.
And I don't even know how we got there now, but flowers. After, I mean, I guess you have to have a soldier to have a tree, then a flower. But
exactly. Yep.
You've planted that soldier, and then you've gotten a tree or a coffee plant to grow for 3 to 4 years, and then you have gotten zero coffee for that time.
Oh mate, what
considering that one tree that's been growing for 3 to 4 years is only going to produce 1 pound of coffee.
Oh my, well, per year,
and it's going
to last 30 years, perhaps. So you're going to get
30
pounds. Whoa, mate, do the stats.
But after 3 to 4 years, you get a flower for the first time. You're super excited.
Yes.
You're stoked.
You wake up that morning, you smell the air, you go, I can smell the coffee flower. It smells like a jasmine. It's wow.
Yeah.
Lavender.
And last week, or in podcasting years, last week,
yes,
you talked about when you were in Brazil and Ethiopia, the aroma of coffee as you were just in the country. Is that the flower you were talking about?
It was the flower, and it was in Ethiopia. In Brazil, they weren't flowering at the time I was there, so I didn't get to smell the flower. It was just leaves. But in Ethiopia, you go down these dirt roads and you would smell the flowers. They're just growing wild.
And you think about it, I don't know I'm obviously not great at flowers, but I don't know, dandelions or some kind of flower that you see here that if you could smell, I've got a cold at the moment, so I can't really smell, but it's just something natural and abundant. It's like when you go to the redwood forest and you smell redwood trees. Yeah. You smell it because there's a bunch of redwood trees.
Yeah, it's just they're there and they're naturally there, and coffee trees in Ethiopia particularly are naturally there.
Right.
And you smell them, and people just have them in their gardens growing up, they would probably call them weeds. Oh, got to get rid of them. They've got so many of these bloody coffee trees around.
Like blackberry bushes in Oregon.
Yes, could be.
So you've got your flower.
Yes.
Now this flower.
Yes.
Self-pollinating.
Oh,
boom.
Man.
Easy.
So we would go, man, oh, boom, because we've been talking about self-pollination and what that means. And again, you should have been listening in your science class.
I definitely wasn't.
And neither was I, so I had to look it up.
We had to go to the Academy of Google.
That's right, mate.
But we looked it up, and it was, and I'm not going to be able to explain this scientifically, Dad. Mm-hmm. You might have
I might have one or more words, I don't know.
But the flower essentially has everything it needs to pollinate itself within the flower.
Yep. And when you say pollinate, so that it can actually produce the cherries again.
Right.
So that, So compared to self-pollination, what's the opposite of self-pollination is... I'm not sure what the opposite...
Selfless pollination?
You've just made up another word.
I'll enter that one into Google.
But self-pollinate, the plant can do it itself.
I think of it like blueberries.
Cross-pollination.
Cross-pollination, that's the word. Because blueberries, as far as I know, have to have 2 different types of blueberry plants right next to each other so they can cross-pollinate to grow blueberries.
I know that's what... what's the tree we have at the backyard here? That has to have 2, a male and a female tree.
Dogwood?
No. Fruit tree that we're growing. Feijoa. Yeah.
That's right. So there's that, which does take insects or the wind.
Yep.
And... if you got the wind, it's a lot less consistent, who knows? I mean, but self-pollination, it can actually, what we are reading is that basically as the flower is growing, before it even blossoms, opens up the flower, it can already be shedding some of that pollen.
You've got the male, female, the stamen, the stigma, all these things that you learned in botany.
Birds and the bees.
It is the birds and the bees. Anyway, but they touch, they get but they're pollinated.
Easy now. We're getting into a whole new type of podcast here.
Sorry. And voila, I'm just going to say voila.
You can talk to your parents about what voila is.
And
I'm not going to talk to you, even though you're my parent.
Okay. It's already been done.
Too much.
Sorry. And the tree, that's the good thing about a coffee tree is suddenly it is able to do that by itself,
right?
Compared to having other things happening to make it possible.
Which is interesting because it almost seems like a courtesy, and I know that it's not, but like with the complexity of coffee, with the altitude, all the differences you have to grow coffee appropriately and have it taste fine.
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of nice that it self-pollinates.
Yeah, it's sort of helpful, isn't it? I agree with
like
you.
One little piece. It's like,
the farmer can go, whew.
Yeah.
I can stay in tonight.
But I think we talked about it last week as well. But like, if you use bees, farmers were finding 50% more.
50%. That's right.
More. What would you call it? More
pollination.
More pollination.
Yeah, it happens 50% more. Chance, more productivity, as you're saying, it increases the likelihood of good cherries coming out of the tree and more yield of that tree. So these bees, these insects, they have been doing work with them and saying, actually, it's important that they are around. It's important that we have trees around that
it's like having a fact checker. You know, you can fill out. It's like filling out your quiz, your test, and then having another person come behind you and just make sure all of it's filled out.
Yeah, it's true, and it shows you also the importance of having forests there, that you're not just taking them all away, because that forest attracts insects and other things.
Which
shade.
Some you want, some you don't.
Yeah, true. There are some you don't, but typically it's gonna attract the good stuff,
right?
And it's gonna shade the trees below it, so they're not going to get burnt. And whereas in Brazil, you don't need that so much, but most of the world that grows Arabica trees is going to need shade, because they don't want to just burn it off, because the temperatures, as we were saying earlier, is an important part of it.
Right. So cherries, we're going to go through this is not intensely complex at all.
No,
but the way that they go is over time they go from, or I guess they go from where they start green.
Yeah.
Go kind of a yellow, orange, and then red.
Yeah, and depending on the varietal, some even go pink. I mean, it depends what the end result is. But they change color, and that's a determinant of where the ripeness is, how sweet the sugars are working in that plant, photosynthesis working here.
So different coffees could end up their final color being a different, like yellow or something.
Yep, yellow couture.
I think of it like that old cherry tree we used to have in the backyard of the other house.
Oh, yes.
And there was 3 cherries types grafted into the tree.
Weird, I know, yeah.
But one was yellow.
Yep.
One was red, and then one was yellow red. So
they all tasted good in different ways.
Yeah, they did all have a different taste.
The point here, though, as you're talking about the change of color of coffee, is or that cherry tree at home. If you pick them too soon, you go yuck, no matter which color it was.
Right.
It's just too hard.
Unripe is unripe.
Unripe is unripe. And you think about that, and we may have said this before, but if I've said to you jokingly that a coffee picker going up the side of the Andes, that was a bit of extreme, but it's high altitude in Andes, and there's probably some fairly steep terrain to get through.
As you abseil down to get to the coffee.
Okay, as the helicopters are above, and you're going, yeah, okay.
Right, but the idea that, it's just not, it's not reasonable, or it doesn't make economic sense to hire someone to go out and pick 20 times in a season when they could just go out twice.
Right.
Or for 2 periods of time.
And yet it does make economic sense to pick just 20 times in the season, to pick just the right ones, so they taste better and we'll pay more for them.
Well, let me throw this curveball in there.
Do it.
Poop.
Ooh, what?
Poop coffee. So when you get coffee from like monkeys or whatever.
Caught up with you now.
But there's always that, have you had that poop coffee? Well, and it's like the animals that are picking the fruit are only picking the fruit for the actual fruit content. They're not chewing up the bean.
And they're picking which ones? They're picking the ripe ones. There you go.
And so it's like having a worker going out constantly, all the time, only picking the best ones.
Yeah.
But that's,
in some places,
you can't hire a bunch of monkeys.
That's right.
Or elephants or
possums, whatever those animals are. I think they're in Indonesia.
I don't know. Yeah.
That's another.
That's
But that's where some places are cottoning on to that and realizing that if we pay our workers a little more in wage, just to pick those ones, they start learning, okay, if I don't pick that one, but I pick this one, I'm going to get paid more. I'll do that.
Well, and I think that's another part where another podcast, another day, but that's another part to the education process for coffee farming and coffee culture in all countries is important, even for the person just working on the farm.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might work at a job right now that you don't love the job, but you do it for the money. So you may not know everything about the job. I'm sure that's the same with some coffee places.
Oh, very much so.
And so it's like, if we can educate those people who are picking the fruit, we can actually get a better cup as well.
Which then moves into that's quite often the case. It's just a survival thing for the pickers to do that. How can you therefore invest in their lives to start making them feel more quality of life? So, and that's where you get the whole revolution of this farm. One of our farms in Guatemala does this right now, and I think this is good. This is going in the right direction. Where let's build a school. So when the picker is picking the cherry, they know their kid is back home learning education, and school's out, they can come and pick as well. Great. Yeah. But then you've got things called hospitals and medical attention to those pickers who get grazed, who get sick, who their kids do. And now you're starting to help and improve the whole livelihood of those people. So for some, it still will be just a job because they would rather be with doing something else. Right. To others, they go, this is sustainable. I could do this. I could have a living on this.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That's cool.
I mean, that sort of got off the tangent there, but yeah.
To course correct for a second, just for the sake of this episode, I want to talk about the layers in the bean. Another good image that I'll throw up on whatever camera is looking at us. It is so interesting to think about how many layers there are that we miss out on. I think you have a really cool thing that actually Olivia made or helped make. Was that Russian doll?
My daughter.
You took like a Russian doll and painted it like a coffee bean, and it has all the layers. But
those Russian dolls that you take the big one off, and you get to the next layer, you take that one off. There's something inside that one,
right?
And I don't think people realize often that a coffee cherry is just like that. And we're going to get onto the processing of what they do to take that off, and how different ways they do it to get rid of the fruit, the mucilage part of it.
But how many layers are there?
Well, I mean, the diagram we've got in front of us here has got about 7. I've seen more detailed diagrams of way more than just 7 layers.
Yeah, well, we'll start with just the 7 today.
We'll start with 7, okay.
But so I'll just go through them super fast. You stop me if there's one you like, we need to talk about that one.
Okay.
But there's the center cut, which is the very center.
Oh, mate.
Oh, my.
Sorry, you said to stop you.
There's the bean, which we've all seen roasted.
Yeah. Probably should say there's 2 beans.
There's 2 beans
in there's 1 bean and half, I probably should say.
Is there always?
No, you're right. There's one called the pea berry, which is a whole history.
It's like essentially both halves merged.
It's sort of a defect, but it's not. It's a defect that tastes really, really good. But you don't want to take all the pea berries out and then leave the ones that don't have the pea berries, the ones that are joined together, because now you'll have a cherry that doesn't taste as good, because the pea berries add to goodness of the quality.
Oh, my.
Anyway, sorry.
Then you've got the silver skin.
I'll be quiet.
The parchment or the hull. Mm-hmm. The pectin layer, pulp, outer skin, or the cascara.
Yeah.
Ooh. And I think it's interesting because we're at Caravan. They had a coffee tree. They might still have the coffee tree.
They do.
They still do. And I've eaten a cherry from that before. And it is interesting. It gives you a whole new perspective. It tastes kind of like, doesn't taste like much, to be honest.
No, it's a mild sort of
It's a very watery, light note.
And it may be just our Caravan tree that we haven't done very well. Low altitude, whatever we've done to it.
But there's so many layers. You eat the cherry off of it, and then there's that mucilage or the pulp around the outside.
I would stop you right there, because we've been getting, one stage we got some cascara, you called it, the outer skin.
Yeah.
Which usually,
you make tea out of it.
Exactly. You can buy it online. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you think about what's in some funky teas, and some of it's just like orange peel. So why not do it out of?
And they do.
Bean cherry
they
peel.
Would say that it's full of antioxidants. It's good for you. It's all that stuff. But really, the farmer, when they take that first outer layer off, the cascara, they can either just put it back in as fertilizer, because it's good for the trees that are growing, those 3 to 5 year trees growing.
They can put
the soldiers, and or they could use it to. They sometimes use it to burn. Not to just burn off, but put into the drying. When they dry the seeds, they put it into their drying machines, and I've seen them where they use wood and cascara as a source of fuel to burn, to heat the drying machines.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot of ways you can use that.
You can.
Well, I want to jump really quickly. I'm going to jump over quite a bit of notes here. I'm going to jump from the seed.
Yeah, I haven't even got to that really, but yeah, okay. What are you?
We're going to jump to Arabica versus Robusta.
I wonder, Reed.
Yeah.
We're at 24 minutes already, and this is a big topic.
Maybe we save this for another
Because
episode.
I was saying to you earlier, when you get to the Arabica, Robusta, there's Liberica, there's Excelsior, there's a whole lot of species of coffees you're talking about.
Some of those sound like spells.
They probably, some are
Excelsiamos.
whoa, oh, wow, mate. Some of them are spells, so they're that good, you just woo!
Spellbound.
Okay. What I was getting to here, I think we're onto a topic that is really, really important.
I agree.
And I don't think we want to just skip into this in 5 minutes. It's going to take a whole podcast, if not more, because you're talking about the whole importance of that species. I think we may have said it right at the beginning, that species is going to end up in the cup.
Right.
And whether you have an Arabica or Robusta, they're going to end up in the cup. If you have an Arabica, you can break it down, as you were saying, to Typica and Bourbon and a whole lot of, and that's going to end up in the cup.
Right.
And so what the farmer does there is going to end up in our palates.
Well, I completely agree. I think it's way important enough to be able to dedicate more than just what we have left over in today for that. So let's throw a little teaser in there.
Yes.
Let's let the people know what we might be talking about next time. Because we did some research today about just the different altitudes you can grow them at, root depth.
Yeah.
How big the roots are, how close can you plant all the coffees.
Yeah.
How much the Robusta versus Arabica produce.
Yeah, these have huge impacts on the farmer and what the money he's going to get for it and how quickly he's going to get the money or not. Yeah.
I was amazed by the size of leaves on some of the different species and different things like that. So there's just so many different parts to that. Flavor profile, sugar content, fat content, caffeine content, all these different things.
It blows your mind.
So next week, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the different types of coffee.
Which is right, the different types of coffee. And I read one, first book I read, it said there's 120 species. That includes Arabica, Robusta, and all the other ones.
Right.
Then the next one I read, they've got are now at 129.
Yeah.
They're discovering more of them. And you're realizing this is getting bigger and bigger.
Well, and to end on,
Yes.
this was a mind-blowing just bomb.
Whoa.
This is what this was.
What's that?
When you told me today.
Yes.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Well, I think you are because you told me.
Oh, okay.
But that the Arabica bean,
Yes.
they may have discovered that Arabica came from Robusta.
Oh, poof, mate. Yeah.
Mind absolutely blown.
Which they only discovered the Robusta not that in the Congo, not that long ago, in the 40s or something. But
wow.
Yes, we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So join us next week for that. And again, thank you for joining us this week for all that we've talked about this week.
We got a little excited, didn't we?
There was a lot of fun stuff.
And it was botany.
I know. I was never this excited about botany.
No, was I.
But again, thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of the episode. Thank you to Josh, who had suggested some different camera styles.
Oh, yes.
Which we tried to implement.
I hope you're enjoying it.
So thank you for that. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to us. You can contact us on our website or Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Instagram's a good one at the moment. I'm on there quite a bit. But feel free to send us a note, send us a suggestion, send us a whatever. Something nice, but whatever. Anyway, and we'll join you next week for some talk about Arabica versus Robusta versus all the other.
I hope people get to sleep tonight.
Yeah, thanks.